Experiment, who is well tuned in to the. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Joe.
How are you?
Doing fine.
Bill Glahn, you're with the Center of the American Experiment, and you take a pretty good pulse on what's happening here locally. I was curious if you had any knowledge of just who it is that's backing Mary Moriarty.
Yeah, so I kind of looked into that. I've been doing a series of posts on the center's website that I call Minnesota for Sale.
Right.
And I was curious about this party battle between Keith Ellison and Mary Moriarty. And
right.
I had done some digging into Keith Ellison's donors, and it's interesting he backs Mary, or he backed her in the last election, and he took over the prosecution of this murder case from her a couple of weeks ago. And I was just wondering, are they backed by the same people? Maybe, maybe not. But that was interesting to me to find for a local prosecutor's race. Local, Hennepin County is a big county, but it's not that well known nationwide. That in her campaign, she raised $294,000, and most of it was from donors in Minneapolis, or at least in Hennepin County. But I found dozens of donations from around the country, including from 18 different states in the District of Columbia. So there were the usual suspects donating from New York and San Francisco, Chicago, big cities like that, but also people from Tennessee and Maryland, all these other places I wasn't expecting to find. And then I also found on the state's campaign finance website a couple of fairly prominent in Democratic circles, prominent dark money groups that spent fairly big dollars on her behalf in the election. So there's a group called Take Action Minnesota.
Aren't they George Soros funded?
I have traced money back to George Soros's organization that they, and the other group I found, Faith in Minnesota, which is a project of a nonprofit called Isaiah. Both of them have taken money from Soros-related groups over the years, but I couldn't find any direct link between Soros groups and the 2022 Hennepin County attorney race.
Okay.
So I could find fairly direct links to, say, Keith Ellison's race, because you had George Soros and one of his sons donated money under their own name to Keith Ellison's campaign for the last go round.
All right.
So I got dollar for dollar. I got their names associated with the max contribution they could to Keith's campaign. But I didn't find anything like that for Mary Moriarty. I didn't find a direct correlation between a Soros dollar and her campaign like I did for Keith's campaign.
Do you know anything about Soros? Have you done research?
No, I haven't. I've read his capsule biographies, but there's all kinds of conspiracy theories floating around about the guy, and I don't know if there's any truth to anything. He's been around a long time, and he was famous for crashing the British pound decades ago and betting against the pound, and made tons of money, and very wealthy man. And it's been documented by himself that he's given out something like $32 billion through his charities and political giving over the years. $32 billion, that alone would rank him one of the world's wealthiest men.
If it's true, for example, that he's funded about, let's call it 20% of the county and city attorneys in the country the closer you get to the country's tallest buildings. And I don't know that that's true. That's a number I've read. All I want to know is, what the hell does he gain by going soft on crime? And I just have never come up with an answer on that.
Well, again, I haven't studied the man. And although you mentioned the county attorneys, I'd looked into, as part of an earlier effort, some funding of races in the Commonwealth of Virginia that he was behind. And I can tell you why he's picked these local races, because you can buy them for cheap.
Okay.
So, in the case of Mary Moriarty, maybe it was less than $1 million.
Right.
Less than $1 million spent on her race. And then she's the head of an office that has an annual budget of $69 million and hundreds of staffers, dozens of lawyers working under her, controls law enforcement in Hennepin County.
Right.
So for less than $1 million, you can control the law enforcement of a county that's bigger than 8 states.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, because he's bigger than North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, Wyoming, these little population states. Hennepin County's got a lot of people in it, 1.3 million.
Right.
And so for less than $1 million, you could buy the law enforcement policy for more than 1 million people. So it's bang for the buck. But what does he get from this other than, maybe he's aligned with the belief that there's too much incarceration, there's too many arrests, that they're disproportionately in minority communities, and that needs to stop, and he's going to stop it because he can and he has the money to do it. But if you look back at his career and how he crashed the British pound and how he's made money in various markets, it's based on chaos. That the more disruption there is, the more volatility there are in markets, the more opportunities there are to make money by betting against a currency, by shorting somebody's bonds, or however he's decided to place his bets. And so he's got the fortune large enough that he can single-handedly move markets by betting in one direction or another. So, again, this is just speculation on my part. I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together based on stuff I know has happened, stuff I know he has done, and why is he still doing this? There's also, I've been digging into this for a different piece on the website. One of his sons seems to have taken over the political enterprise. The guy's 92 years old. I don't know how active he is in making decisions on where money goes or strategic direction, but his son is very active. And I posted a picture that his son has on his Twitter account of, his name is Alexander with his arm around Keith Ellison. They're good friends. He describes them as a dear friend. They know each other. They've known each other for years. So, I guess I'm more interested in what maybe his sons are up to than the man himself, who's getting on in years.
Wow. I'm grateful that the center of the American experiment is in our midst. It's becoming increasingly an island of sanity for what's taking place. Where is your work taking you there? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I'm just trying to report on the stuff I don't think is getting reported on. So I've been fascinated for a long time on what's called the low information voter.
Right.
People who cast their votes, who don't pay attention to the news, who aren't fully informed on what's going on in the world, and what information are they basing their decisions on? Are they just whatever they might have come across in the legacy media, something they saw on TV, something they heard in the radio or on a podcast? What are they basing their decisions on when they go into the voting booth and cast a ballot? And so I just see a vacuum in the Twin Cities and Minnesota media scene where, the Democrats and what they're up to, it's all positive. Hey, they're helping people. They're giving you free this, giving you free that. And so I've been trying to dig into the mechanism. Well, why are Republicans not winning statewide elections when they have in the fairly recent past? And why are Democrats suddenly participating in elections at much, much higher rates than they have ever done historically? What's going on? And, part of it is follow the money. The Democrats are outspending Republicans in Minnesota something like 2-1, 3-1, and that gives them an infrastructure to turn out the vote way more than Republicans are. But I'm starting to dig into this and try to answer the whys and not just the who and the what.
I wish you'd I want you to turn yourself loose on why Republicans have abandoned urban America.
Well, it's interesting. The piece I'm writing right now, I was doing while you're working, that's a good question, and it deserves getting into. But I'm just fascinated by the fact that Minneapolis and St. Paul are voting at much, much higher rates than the rest of the state. So it's not that there are fewer Republican voters in Minneapolis and St. Paul. There are as many as there ever were. But all of a sudden, Democrat voters are coming out of the woodwork and voting at rates you don't see anywhere else in the country.
Bill, are you suggesting that there's perhaps something at work here?
Well, I'm still digging. I'm digging.
Okay.
I don't have any evidence of anything other than this is very curious.
I agree.
Bucking the trend of nationwide voting, that Minnesota's biggest urban areas are participating at much, much higher rates than anywhere else in the state. And where historically they participated either at rates at or below state averages. So not only are they exceeding state averages, they're leading this big uptick in voter participation across the state. And at the same time, we have the Democrats at the state legislature. Today, they're going to be passing a bill to change all kinds of voting rules, all kinds of election rules, ostensibly to increase voter participation, even though Minnesota literally has the nation's highest voter participation rate. So we're already number one in voter participation.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats are telling us the biggest problem with elections is lack of voter participation. So, it kind of makes me wonder what really is the motive behind some of this legislation they're undertaking. Because you look at a couple of these statewide races, they were only won by a few thousand votes.
Right.
For state auditor and attorney general. And the difference, at least in those two races, is entirely the increase in participation rates by urban voters. So urban voters are more civic-minded than they used to be, more motivated than they used to be. I'm not quite sure what's behind their sudden interest in voting, but they are voting in much bigger numbers than ever before, and they are flipping the results of races. So I guess maybe the short answer to your question is, why have Republicans abandoned urban areas? Maybe they haven't to the extent you think they have. But what's happened is Democrats have doubled, tripled down on the urban vote, and finding urban votes that they had never found in past cycles. So instead of focusing on the suburbs, the exurbs, where everybody thinks the elections are won or lost, it turns out, and I think you were onto something, it turns out in Minnesota, elections are won and lost in the densest populated areas of the state.
Right. Well, people can follow you at the Center of the American Experiment. We got another. Kenny wants to talk to you.
First, one thing about that, our discussion we just had, we had a piece of information this week or last week that said Republican voters base their votes on who the person is, how he or she stands on policy, while Democratic voters just vote Democrat no matter what. Do you find that to be the case?
Oh, for sure. I did a long Twitter thread on this and related subjects.
Maybe you wrote that. Yeah, that's where I saw it on your Twitter feed.
I think you're just repeating back to me what I said. So
right.
Good, I guess. But no, that's been my experience. That in my involvement in Republican Party politics, and that's not anything to do with the center. The center is nonpartisan. But in my past live involvement in Republican Party politics, Republicans are very interested on winning the argument. They want voters to vote for them because they're right on the issues, they've got the right positions on issues, or they just have a killer resume that that they've accomplished a lot and they make good representatives or good executives because of past accomplishments and demonstrated skills and judgment and abilities. But if you look at, how did Mary Moriarty win the race to be Hennepin County Attorney? She won the race for Hennepin County Attorney because she was endorsed by the Democratic Party.
Right.
And she was on the ballot. It was a nonpartisan race, but she was on the sample ballot that got passed out to every voter in Minneapolis, along with all the other races that prevailed in the state and the county level. So she got the nomination, if you will, for the Democratic Party in that race, and that was enough for her to win, even though she was the lowest vote getter among Democrats. So
sure,
she didn't perhaps win the argument with independents and Republicans, but it didn't matter because Democrats all voted party line all down the line.
Sure.
And you see that, and my best example of that is John Fetterman, the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord.
The guy has spent most of his short career in the Senate, either in the hospital or incapacitated. And all of this was evidently clear on the campaign trail. He had a stroke. He couldn't articulate complete sentences. He has cognitive difficulties. It's very sad. But Democrats all voted down the line for him, regardless of whether he was up to the job or not. But again, I don't want to get into the back and forth on the Republican side, but people, the Republican candidate wasn't quite my cup of tea, or he wasn't as conservative as I would have liked, or I didn't like what he said about that, and so I'm just going to skip that line on the ballot. And there's back to the voter participation thing. It's been my experience that Republicans are always looking for a reason not to vote for you or to vote no, and Democrats just go right down the ticket, follow that sample ballot line after line after line. And it just, there's not the independent streak on the Democrat side of the aisle that there is on the Republican side. When it comes to candidates and voting, it's huge difference in the participation rate. So when Trump was on the ballot, Republicans and independents came out and voted. When it's not a presidential year, then Republicans participate at much lower rates, but Democrats can be counted year in, year out to vote and vote party line all the way.
Vote often, yeah.
Okay, and now you know how dumb I am. I need you to explain to me one more time Soros and how he makes money. I have his money is based on chaos, so crime goes up, business, it hurts business. How does he benefit?
I don't know. He's a private investor, and his portfolio is not something that's publicly known. So I don't know if he's shorting bonds or what he's doing to benefit from this, or maybe this is just a personal hobby of his. It has nothing to do with his money.
Sure.
He's a true believer in the cause of left-wing politics, regardless of how he came about his money, and he wants to put his money where his beliefs are.
This is his town ball. This is what he does when he's not working.
It's dangerous.
Maybe he's retired from the finance game. He's certainly wealthy enough. He doesn't have to do any more work. He doesn't have to win any more financial bets. And you see this a lot with the Silicon Valley guys or the Hollywood people. They made their money. Silicon Valley is an interesting case for sure, in that a lot of these markets where they make their money are some of the most ruthless capitalistic markets on the planet.
Right.
And they have won. They have won the race. The cell phone market or the browser market or whatever it is. They won the game of capitalism. And the first thing they do with their fortune is to support candidates and causes that want to end capitalism.
Right.
So it's a very weird combination of the two. They seem to be voting opposite of their interests, but maybe I don't understand the nuances of the game.
Feel free to use us, Bill, if you ever want to break anything. We'd love to hear from you.
Sure. I may take you up on that.
We'll stay in touch. Thank you. You can tell us how to follow you on Twitter.
Twitter, my handle is @BillGlahn. That's Glahn, and then I blog at the Center of the American Experiment.
And I will post both the article that you were mentioning about Mary Moriarty and also your Twitter account to the Garage Logic podcast today, Bill.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, we'll be in touch.